somewhere towards the late 80s, another really key project came into the office. There was something interesting happening in the Middle East as they were developing, in Saudi Arabia particularly initially. The relationships that Ted and the partners built in Saudi Arabia became really, really important. They really trusted us as engineers to deliver a great deal more than perhaps we would have been asked to do in the home country. Because they trusted us, they'd ask us to do different types of engineering, whole projects. With Terry Ely, they asked us to do a gigantic civil engineering project in Kuwait. Doubling the coastline of Kuwait is the thing we always remember about it. And interesting enough, that project is still active. It's called Sea City in Kuwait, and it's a really successful piece of engineering, pure clean water, flushing in and out of new inlets to allow better quality housing, a nicer environment for people to live. Still goes on, but that started in that time. We were trusted to do that sort of work because we'd been with them for so many years. And similarly, another project which was called the Diplomatic Club at the time and became called TUWAIQ Palace in Riyadh, a fantastic project, completely multidisciplinary engineering, working with Fry Otto as the inspiration, all sorts of technologies for construction, membrane structures, cable structures, glass-clad cable structures even, an environmental system which we had to get our heads around, using the fabric for cooling, integrated systems into the way that the building and the slabs were formed and so on. The sorts of things that became bread and butter. We were testing it all out on the Diplomatic Club, the TUWAIQ Palace, and it created one of the most important buildings, certainly for its time for us, but I still think one of the historically most important projects. A beautiful, beautiful project. But that was a sign, I think, that BuroHappold by this stage was really getting a grip on multidisciplinary engineering, civil engineering, structural engineering, environmental engineering. We'd of course have an office at this stage in Riyadh, starting to be more involved in design as well as looking after site projects. We had our office in Bath, but now the pressure was on for us to start to think about expanding beyond that. We were starting to interest a wider group of people, so an interesting opportunity came to us from Hong Kong. Out there they were struggling to find engineers who could get their heads around a very unusual kind of roof that the city architect had designed, but they were struggling to deliver it. So they did an international competition looking for engineers to deliver it. BuroHappold won, and it was a fabulous project because, again, it was doing something that nobody had done before, a cable net structure, creating a bowl, then encased in concrete. You had to work out how to get that concrete up there, and all sorts of interesting things. That let us set up an office for a while in Hong Kong, which opened other opportunities, working with Derek Walker on the KOWLOON Park and so on. So there's some interesting little landmark buildings that BuroHappold achieved back in the 80s. These projects were starting to show that BuroHappold was being taken seriously outside of the Middle East and the UK. And we were really starting to come of age. Ted and the founding partners were starting to think about how could we possibly create a practice which could carry on for future generations. It's often something that partners forget to do, but putting in place a succession plan, putting in place a structure where they could pass on ownership to a new generation, to successive generations, was really important. So they eventually came through with a plan as to how they could pass on to the next generation. And me and many of my colleagues at the time, of course, benefited from this, and they were able to start to create new partners who were becoming owners of the business as they were, and they were given proper responsibilities and authority to go out there, win work, do work, build teams, and it became at that point a multi-generational firm. Fantastic thing for Ted to have done. Of course, it sadly wasn't long after that momentous move that Ted died at a surprisingly early age of 65, and we lost Ted The industry lost Ted. There was a lot of wonderful support from all the friends and colleagues that he's made. So it was a very good send-off for the man. But what better send-off really for Ted than the fact that the practice still flourished. There were founding partners, there were coming in new partners, there was a whole map, if you like, as to how this practice would carry on. By this stage it had already established some degree an international presence, an international reputation. We've got a lot to build on, and that's really what people knuckled down and did. We started to build on the legacy that Ted gave us. We had 20 years of Ted, and he'd left something behind the next 20 years. We've really been able to grow it, and I think we really have done him justice to the legacy that he gave us.